Greetings, humans. I am going to do some comments on this video with Brad Polumbo and with Brianna Wu today. Some interesting points that came up through this video. I'm not going to do the whole thing, I'll try to do a little bit. I'm going to do some comments this week, and then in the new year, I'm going to be doing regular videos about a lot of politics, arts, of course, arts and culture, and talking about the gender wars. So let's get into it with this video.
Bree, thanks for coming on the show.
It's such an honor. I'm such a huge fan of you on Twitter. I didn't know right-wing gays were so cool. So it's a brave new world. When I came out, all the right-wing gays were like 40-year-old Republican men that were closet queens holding secret orgies at Ole Miss. So I guess times have changed.
They certainly have. So
Well, there probably are some of those still. And that's part of the thing of really looking at this video, because Brianna talks about coming from a conservative background and of all of her trans friends women, whatever, their trans friends women, trans women are all conservative backgrounds, and that's something that I think really is kind of ignored in a lot of the situation, and wondering if so much of this trans issue is actually a contorted homophobia that goes on. And I think that they talk about it some, but that point I thought was kind of interesting because, if looking back at some of the actual history of gay rights, gay history, gay power, that it was pretty sexist, and there was a lot of anger, hatred, and open just misogyny towards any of the lesbians who were actually the organizers within the LGB movement. So, and transvestite people being kind of the troublemakers, like both gays and of course lesbians. Lesbians had the open war with, but gay men either cheered on or antagonized. So actual history of LGB is kind of important.
I've been following you with interest lately because you've been doing kind of a media tour and making a lot of waves, speaking out as a Democrat and a Democratic strategist and as a prominent trans woman about where you think Democrats and the progressive movement have gone astray on these issues. So we saw this being a huge issue, an outsized issue, really, compared to probably what it should be in the 2024 election, but it was a losing issue, it seems, for Democrats.
So Brianna's been involved with the Democratic Party and is taking this position of, I've just come out as trans. But like all this time, over all these years, was Brianna involved in the same trans activism, or was it, was Brianna going along with it and saying, this isn't right, and then all of a sudden in the last few months decided, no, wait, I'm going to come out and speak about it, which, it is a lot of the things that Brianna, I'm just going to say Brianna's name. I don't really even know what their dead name, whatever regular name is. And I know of people, getting all, making sure we're saying the right names, pronouns and all that, whatever. I'm just going to say what I know. So with Brianna, and I'm just going to go with she, and I know that, this person is not all up in arms about not being, referred to as she, but the political aspect of it, of the Democratic Party, and they're going to talk about this of the divide of progressives and Democrats, and the reality is there's more than that. And even like that within progressives, it was seen in 2015 and in 2016, I'm sorry. Well, actually in 2015 and again in 2020, Bernie Sanders wasn't able to pull in the Black vote, some of Latino vote, the identity vote. And throughout that time, that identity vote was sort of branching out then with the gender stuff, and all of those things within progressives of talking about the working class and the economy and whatever people would say of a more socialism ideas. And he calls himself a Democrat, so democratic socialist, which is not socialism and not Marxism or any of that stuff. The Democratic Party has a lot of different divisions, and this loudmouth class that they're talking about here is actually a lobbyist group. And I'm really curious to know then what Brianna knows about these lobbyist groups, specifically the Human Rights Campaign, and now, of course, the ACLU, used to defends free speech, to the point, that defending Nazis to be able to go and have a march and a rally, to now be just all out of they're the ones that brought this lawsuit to the Supreme Court. So I am curious to be able to pick this person's brain a little bit more, because they've been involved within the party, and to make these comments about it is sort of interesting.
What do you think happened? How did we get here, and what went wrong?
So specifically on the trans issue, it's really straightforward, Brad. I came out 20 years ago. And I wanted to be a woman, and I wanted to get married. I want my life to be about being trans. So I did what a lot of people did 20 years ago. I transitioned, and I went on with my life as best as I could. And that doesn't mean like every once in a while people didn't like figure out I was trans. It just meant like as I was going through my career, I shouldn't talk about it. I just didn't want it to be the focus of who I was for my public presence, which sounded good. But the problem is now the literal lunatics are in charge of trans rights. They are crazy. They have some of the stupidest ideas.
Well, it's not just that. It's realizing that in the last 10 years, gradually through marketing, promotion, lobbying, the difference being if, back then if you wanted to fit in, now of seeing, and especially for these men that say they want to be women, they get a lot of power from it. And it's, very attractive to go from just being a guy who really doesn't get a lot of attention to being a female who gets tons of attention and gets put in positions of power quite easily because of this presentation. And I wouldn't be a bit surprised if a lot of the things that Brianna has accomplished are because of being trans. And, whether that Brianna wants to admit that or not, it's probably the case. And I would say as well, for a different kind of clout for women wanting to be men, that for them it's a being able to yield a power in leadership that women aren't able to do. So a much different presentation for these men wanting to be women. It's just an instant platform in a lot of ways.
Ideas you've ever seen, and it just keeps spiraling into more and more and more insanity. And Brad, when I came out, just to tell you how much things have changed, when I came out 20 years ago, the idea of vaginoplasty and FFS being covered by insurance was a pipe dream. Like none of us could have dreamed.
That's facial feminization surgery.
And honestly, and this is where I really disagree here, is that no, and it still shouldn't be covered by insurance. And all this conversation about, what's assassinating CEOs and stuff for insurance companies, I think this is ridiculous. And this is absolutely going to be an issue within this. I was cringing and waiting and wondering if this something within about the shooter was going to be related to that in a way, but I guess it wasn't. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's going to be part of it too, because you're creating a lifelong medicalized person. And from like that pushing to be a kid, a teenager, to then be on all kinds of medications, of course, then of plastic surgery for women and for men was a bit addictive. All throughout, of people just, not able to ever stop. And as you get older, you're going to continue, this starts to sag, I got this wrinkle here. And why is this going to be any different then? For people, especially where their whole being is about how they present, everything of all their interests and how they speak, what they're involved in is around this. Why wouldn't you then continue to just be another like that, 70-year-old women that are just all plastic and just look ridiculous? This is going to be the same situation. And wait, we're going to all pay for this with insurance? Because why? Because psychiatry decided they didn't want to do counseling anymore and just wanted to affirm anybody that came through the door. And I appreciate that Brianna, I believe, talks about that some.
Feminization. I never dreamed I'd be able to get married to a man and have it be legal, which it is. So like from so many ways, the trans rights movement is from the way, like the old school way, got us everything we ever dreamed of. And now this group of radicals is just completely tearing it up. And I think the best example of stupid policy happened in California. So for them to accommodate non-binary people, they made it so you, Brad, could go down tomorrow in California, check a box on the driver's license form, declare yourself female, no hormones, no surgery, nothing, and you've got every legal right in the world to walk into a women's locker room, flop your dick around.
Yeah, so this is where things went wacky, and where it's not just about being trans. And the other part, that word that doesn't come up, I don't think, in this video, is queer. And of being queer, that's where the trend is going now. So when we're talking about trans and these things from 2010, even 5 years ago, in a lot of ways it's outdated, because you don't need to be trans, and the trend is very much moving towards females that now are terrified of being female and have it all in their heads that they're going to be raped all the time, and that they're going to have they got to go shave their heads and all this stuff after the election. That's fear of men. And the other side of having boys being pornified, and they're, especially if they're gay, of saying, hey, it's safer and I get way more attention being trans or queer or non-binary than I do of being gay. So, there's something that needs to be talked about within this, and especially when you're talking about politics, and in California specifically, where then you've got these activists that have been involved in the politics. See, this is part of the thing, is that the people that are involved in the politics of pushing back on this are, of course, coming from a Christian right-wing Republican position, which they're entitled and have every right to have those beliefs. But there's this other belief that is my belief that's not presented anywhere. And there isn't any way for someone like myself to be able to run for office and to get into any kind of power position to bring up these points. And we're going to rely on somebody like Brianna here, which is, not ideal.
If anyone complains, they get and that is the insanity that progressive trans people have brought us to. So someone's got to turn this around.
Yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from, because I feel like it's so funny, because you might relate to this, ironically enough. I have simultaneously been attacked over the years for being transphobic. I'll never forget. I was kicked off a gay men's soccer league, excommunicated in Washington, D.C. with all the hyper woke gays, because they said that my participation, because I had spoken out about minors transitioning and being very concerned about that, they said my participation in the club made hypothetical future transgender members, there weren't any, to be clear, unsafe. Even though, of course, one, my opinions weren't that crazy, and I always communicate them respectfully. And two, I wasn't talking about them at soccer practice. Yeah. But so I've encountered that side of the movement that you just spoke about. But then I've also gotten attacked as, a pro-trans woke liberal by kind of a lot of the far right types as of late, because I still, and I always have, and I always will, defended the rights of trans adults to live their best lives to not be discriminated against. Even today, I see the Republican member of Congress, Nancy Mace, who
Okay, so I do want to talk about Nancy Mace and get into it here, but I want to make some comment about that when he just said, yeah, that's the unfortunate thing, and especially it's, most obvious then within women's sports around this issue with trans people, and, so much of the focus being from the right of kids and sports overlooks this other position that I'm coming to, and that Brad clearly is missing, because oftentimes it seems as though gay men don't seem to see this position from women's point of view, where, this has made you a difficult thing for you in your sports league, but it's also taking the positions of power from women and using this performance of women. And I should just say, of understanding like that, especially of New York City gay scene, 70s and 80s, gay men were absolutely not on board with the transvestites. There was an open war with them. They felt as though in a lot of ways that they were bad, giving them a bad name back then, because they were drinking, they were doing drugs, they were just, prostitutes basically, and of seeing them as being trashy, and of then hiding behind this whole thing of, well, I'm now a different identity, when in a lot of ways they were just considering themselves gay and were screaming gay power and everything, but they were not presenting the community in the best light. So this is the history of pride here, and of understanding that it's continuing on. That gay men then they're going to attack the females of lesbians and ostracize them, and they're also going to be ostracizing or wanting to be ostracized from the transvestites, and we're not all on board with everything going on there.
I used to like using slurs to talk about trans people just openly in her videos from her.
Well, because Nancy Mace is from the right, and she's also trying to build up all this enthusiasm, before Trump comes in, and she's probably got, I believe, she's going to be up for obviously she's going to be up for re-election, so she wants to get her chips in to be seen as this, the moms for liberty, I am woman, hear me roar, I am, all these things about acting as though this is just, pervy guys, and not having any, I don't hear her talking anything about the females which is majority of who's been trans and who are going to be trans. Because of course, let's remember, these are all women from the left. They don't care about women from the left. They're probably happy that they're going and sterilizing themselves. So, there's maybe that consideration within this, is that it is being used as politics. And, I was real concerned of seeing Nancy Mace be immediately, of how she came out so strong, then hearing all the stuff of that she had abuse and of being stalked and stuff. And also I know that she was being harassed by MAGA supporters too for a little while there before her last election, and she turned full into this, Moms for Liberty kind of position. So, and this has not helped the issue at all. Anytime I'm talking to people and they're starting to hear what I'm saying, and then they hear these Moms for Liberty people and they pull back. And it happened 2 different times for me personally of talking to people. So, they're not helpful. And in the situation of Nancy Mace, of what she did this week, it's so funny because seeing the image of the person who shook her hand, and she sang violently shook her hand, and she's walking around with a sling on or something. That person looks to me as though it's a female that's taken hormones and is, not the pervy guy that she's all worried about and is thinks going to assault her in the bathroom. This is a different position. This is a different situation. More than likely, that female was a larger female. Oftentimes, tall females are not considered feminine. Took the hormones, put on the suit, and that's what it looked like to me. But so really, she was assaulted by female. And understanding that I'm a big female. A lot of these trans people I'm not afraid of. Because like that, I'm like, well, I think you should restrain yourself because I could probably knock you out. And I don't want to do that. But, I've been in some situations with some of these people where they're really out of control. And it's a big reason why I wouldn't be involved and go into the rally that happened at Supreme Court, is because I just really don't have patience for their shit. And keep in mind, they keep saying about, the trans progressives. No, these are queer people. Okay. A lot of the trans people, that a lot of people that I knew that were trans, they were doing what Brianna is saying here. They just were fitting in. I had someone I knew 2 months before I knew they were trans. So it is possible. But also keep in mind that person like was very shy, and they didn't talk a lot. They didn't like the sound of their voice. I get that. I don't like the sound of my voice. And I know that, that's a regular thing. I don't think that's out of the ordinary. And they weren't going around grandstanding, and they didn't like when they saw this trending of people just, hey, well, I'm trans too, and getting attention for it. So this is something Nancy Mace isn't talking about. She's all focused on pervs and stuff and sports. And this is a minimal part of this. The power play is the big part within this when it comes to, and like that in a way I would say, Brianna is doing this too. She's got the issues here going on with she. See, I'll say she, whatever. I mean, because she's 20 years of playing female. In a lot of ways, there's nothing male about this person. Let's be honest about that too. Some of them do. I shouldn't say that there's nothing male about Brianna. There are some characteristics that come out, especially if you see Brianna talking with other males. And he's talking with a gay man here, so it's a little bit different. I've seen Brianna talk with other males, especially like that. I'm getting into the video game world, and you see the male come out. And, male interests and female interests are inherently kind of set in some ways. Not exactly. I mean, of course, there are people that deviate from that. But as far as interests go and the way they present themselves about certain interests, some of the stuff if female is performative. It's learned, it's behavior, it's gone on. And going to bring up a point here in a little bit that I find really interesting.
Her congressional office, and I'm like, something has really gone astray here.
He handed her everything she ever needed. Like, the American people used to be with us on bathroom stuff, and like, look, I think like when I go into a bathroom, no one cares, right?
Okay, so the bathroom stuff, people didn't think it through. People just like, well, you just go in the bathroom, and there wasn't any conversation. And when the conversation happened, it came from people from the right. And it was presented then from people to people on the left as being, oh, this is all these Christians and they're, bigots and they don't understand of, all these new ways of thinking and stuff. Well, the issue of understanding, well, it wasn't just about bathrooms then. Then it led into, well, what about locker rooms? What about like that of, swimming pools? What about spas? It continued on then. And of understanding that, women's spaces, they weren't just handed to them. They had to oftentimes fight for them. They are specifically, there's a reason why, spas and certain things are women only, and women, needing to have that solace away from men, as well as men in a lot of ways needing to have solace away from women. And, this being a blurred line and acting as though within women's empowerment, well, if we get involved in men's things, then we're equal. Well, does that reverse back? If men get involved in women's things, does that make us equal? No, in a lot of ways, it ends up pushing women backwards. And, posts of my mom's time, my grandmother's time, much different lifestyle for women.
This is just not an issue for most people. But, the truth is, by pushing this issue further and further and further and further and further and further, like, there is a sentiment now with normal people where Nancy Mace has a constituency on this stuff. The trans community I transitioned with 20 years ago, we could tell a sister, like, hey, I'm sorry, you're not far enough into electrolysis. Don't use the ladies yet. You need to get your passing skills better so you don't create a scene. That's the old school trans community that took some values I think you can appreciate as a center-right gay guy, which is some personal responsibility. Like, if you're a trans woman...
But see, this is that they're missing in the whole conversation here, is that within queer, non-binary, and ideas that come from within this movement of being anti-capitalist, that it has nothing to do with these things of upholding. It's actually the complete opposite of with upholding the gender binaries, that those things are viewed as being control over women and over society, of having the patriarchy remain in place, of having there be these gendered roles. So that's why there are going to be people that mix the two things of being male and being female, and being very open and proud about that. The complete opposite of what it is that Brianna is explaining here of, the rules and norms of old school trans, that's out the door. And anybody that's doing any of that, nobody cares, because it's all trending towards there being no gender, between there being no binary, between there being an androgyny that is not about, it's not about sex. It's more about trying to, I'd say in a lot of ways, it's very anarchistic towards society, in a way of smashing the patriarchy, smashing capitalism, smashing the system, so to speak. And there's something to be said for that. I think some people of my age, of growing up in the 80s and 90s and having there be a very, blurred lines of gender, and seeing roles for females be much more aggressive, and also being pushed of being more sexualized, of having power, female empowerment through sexualizing themselves, which has clearly been a disaster. But I would say that it was also men and porn that helped push that. I mean, online porn in the 2000s, that had huge influences within this, and especially then for the trans community, because for the trans community before this, some people like Brianna were out there, but majority are out there being she-male escorts, being involved in drugs, very much into the party lifestyle of what a lot of the gay community was trying to, well, in some ways, not have be their image.
You should care about if you're freaking other women out. Like, that's a core rule of women only spaces. And this new movement just utterly does not give a shit, Brad. So, I understand.
It's not about not giving a shit. They're against it.
Mace's opinions on this, but
and see, now this is problematic. It's like Brianna here is supposed to be some Democratic operatives, strategy, and knows all this stuff. I just said a whole bunch of things that clearly that Brianna knows nothing about or is ignoring, and understanding that this movement within being queer, being non-binary, that just says it right there. Queer was a slur against gay people. I'd been in many times defended gay friends that were being attacked of being, oh, you queer, and to have it be now where that is the goal of being your identity, that's a whole different thing. And where that is then pushed into politics, and politics can't bring that up and just says, well, of course, of any of these people, like that Marsha Gessen. Marsha Gessen was a lesbian, academic, actually not even academic. They never graduated from college even, but they've got seen as being some intellectual. And because they talk about Putin, then they became non-binary, and now they've decided that they're trans somehow. What that means, how that is, I don't really understand or know. I don't think that they've done anything other than just these words. So you don't even have to do anything. You just say the words. And that's the other part here that Brianna missed completely, is all this stuff going through this feminization and all the surgeries and drugs and all the medicalization. You don't have to do any of that. You just say. And but I did bring that up talking about California. So this is going to be a huge problem for anybody that is in politics. And if you don't want to be real about what's going on, nothing's going to be solved, because we're continuing to stay into this bubble and act like it doesn't matter, but it totally does matter.
We are creating the Nancy Maces out there by giving them everything they need to destroy us.
Yeah, I think we're living through a pendulum swing, right?
Yeah.
Because the wave of trans activism went so far in the opposite direction that now it's swinging back to the opposite extreme, and we're seeing a lot of this backlash. And we can talk more about the bathroom bills, but I think those go too far and are unnecessary and divisive. But I want us to land somewhere back in this.
Well, just understanding is that this person who got elected in Delaware, that whole thing was about creating this spectacle. That person has been working for a human rights campaign, has been involved in lobbying, and got into every time, they maybe didn't make trans be their first, the big issue they were always talking about, but it was embedded and woven throughout. And the intention then of getting into office and running was to challenge and see if anybody would say anything and make a stink about it. And Nancy Mace took that up and did and ran with it. And this person of trying to act like they're taking the higher road and they're not going to be challenging and stuff. This has all been planned. This is all performance that was done. That, it didn't matter if a Nancy Mace or whoever, it was challenging to see if someone, and of course, if being a woman more than likely, and then to go in after them. So as much as they're saying around, the backlash and all the people of supporting Nancy Mace, there's plenty of people that support the other side of saying, Nancy Mace is a bigot and, so, she has not helped whatsoever. She's been, she has used this for political means in the same way that these lobbyist groups have pushed, like that. Joe Biden didn't know anything about any of this stuff. It was these lobbyist groups. Well, Kamala Harris surely did. She had been involved in all kinds of, the queer eye for the straight guy coming to the White House and them all playing games and, all these different speeches. I never heard the speech that they made the commercial of, and I'm sure they could have came up with probably 10 other commercials that would have been, about the trans stuff. But they didn't make that. That commercial was not about the trans stuff. That commercial was actually of showing, look, this person has made some, points about things, and they're sounding really crazy, and they're not pulling back from it. They're not saying, wait, I made a mistake on that. They're just acting like it didn't happen. And that's the mistake that the Democrats are doing. Now, we don't expect the Republicans or Trump or MAGA to ever admit anything that they do is wrong. And we can sit and say, well, tit for tat, we don't need to do that either. But that's the problem, is for people on the left, we do expect a little bit of a higher standard. We do expect to be able to call out people on our own side that are, that are bullshitting here and or that are just, going along because they feel as though this is where the majority is at. But they don't hear voices like myself. Their voices, of having this whole time of having all these different discussions, a whole week of having all these different trans people and a bunch of them elected officials on CNN, not one time of having a female come on that really presented the position that is in between the Republican and Nancy Mace and the Moms for Liberty and the trans activists and the, elected officials that have this label.
Middle. But the trans activists really have taken us off this cliff. I want to know from you, when about did this start? Because I have an idea in my mind of when I remember it changing, but I want to know for you, because the old school transsexuals that you talk about really are the ones who blended in, who most people didn't have a problem with, who are going about their lives. But the new activists, the trans activists, but a lot of them are also non-binary, which we can talk about, whether that really constitutes being transgender. They came in. When do you think that happened, and what were the key differences between them and the old school types like yourself?
Okay, so let's go through this one at a time. So one of the really big things this trend changed in the trans community, Brad, is where are the fucking trans girls that are into men anymore? I don't understand it. It used to be 80% of girls.
So this is a really interesting point. They're into men, and they were into men because they were gay. And now they're into women because it's about not being a binary. And it's, oftentimes like that, they're going to be with these other females who are also presenting as not being in the binary. And, if that's their choice, who's to tell them that they can't do that? Now, see, I don't have a problem with it unless it involves, drugs, pharmaceuticals, and medicalization. There's no reason that you can't be a, non-conforming female. And, I'm sorry, yeah, you've got boobs, they're a pain in the butt sometimes, but you maybe are not old enough to know, like, the pleasures of them and why then they're not just about of being a chest feeder. There's a lot of things that as a young person you don't really know. And this situation here of, they're into who they're into. Well, a big part of finding out whether you're gay or you're lesbian is kind of going to sometimes be around experimenting and realizing and trying it out, seeing like you date a guy and you're like, you know what? He's not turning me on, but that girl I really, really got turned on by. And this is the part too. Difference is, where is there any romance anymore? And romance, of course, understand, has a gender to it. It has that the chivalry and the feminine, and, those ideas around romance have been disintegrated. So when you don't have the ability of having that sense of whimsy and fantasy and everything around a romantic, but when have you ever seen like that of a movie or anything that is actually a romance movie anymore? It's not there. And I think that's something to really be examined, because if you don't have that romance, then it just becomes about the action of sex. And when it's so pornified, then it doesn't matter who you're with, because like that, so much of it has been, with the online porn, having so much of it be about, many people involved and stuff, that it's not about, I'm turned on by this person, that person. You're turned on by everybody then. So, this is another part of the pornification of the LGB, and then creating TNBQ plus I. And that's the other part too, is the I is another interesting one that I'm going to do a video about, probably in the new year when I come back, because I've seen it used so many times, and it's a really interesting topic in a number of ways because it has a biological element to it.
Transitioning wanted boyfriends easily. Yeah, certainly, I'm not out there dating women, and now all of a sudden, I would guess it's like 80% of these girls are trans lesbians, and the amount of behavior women's face is just like, we're causing all kinds of conflict. Because
now realize, okay, you're talking about the trans woman dating other women, but there's a woman on the other side that's making a decision. Now let's step back and think about that for a second. Especially since Trump's election, he's now, the first election. So we've been through a decade here of having Women's March, Me Too, the Me Too backlash, the Me Too fumbles that we just saw now as well, for showing these women just lying outright about being, assaulted. So having, all of that going on, and understanding that you've got females that are turned off by the macho. They're afraid of, being drugged, being assaulted, walking down the street at nighttime, that men don't have conception of. And if they don't even have conception of it, then it's not going to be something that they sympathize with, as opposed to then a trans woman. It has that same anxiety, even more so because they've put themselves out there, and especially of how they're presenting, then they're even more going to be more of that same kind of target. So that's part of why those women are attracted to the trans women, and then whatever, saying that they're lesbians and dating. I know it sounds wacky, but all of this comes back to, every time that we're talking about women, every time it's about, women have a problem with the bathrooms, women have problems with the sports issues, the issue is actually about men. And one about if men that are not macho, masculine, machismo, and they're not even gay, they don't have to be gay. They have something about them that stands out within the animal world of the males picking on the weaker one, or the one seen to be ostracized, that within that environment, that's pushing out. And now that women have to be the ones to deal with that the problem that's actually created in the men's room. So, this is, and then of understanding of having those men, not being able to point out what the problem is of, men's men. They don't understand. They don't really care. They see it from their own homophobic positions around all of this. Or even like they don't even necessarily realize that it's homophobia that they're actually feeling, or any kind of attack to, which we've seen now all over, of this openly talking about the attacks on men and the isolation of men, and why there's all these men that voted for Trump, and the whole sort of WWF environment around men, which they're entitled to do that. And honestly, I think there's way more of a narrative around that being violent and scary and threatening than there is around this situation of the pornification of all of them, of everything around it, because the porn just desensitizes, and it's always got to be extreme. And I knew people that got involved in doing online porn in the early days. And you never know it about these people, of that they weren't even involved. One wasn't even involved in it. It was just that they did the websites. And, some of it just was continually about being shocking, being more shocking. This is in the late 90s, early aughts of doing online porn. That was, then became the advertising and the affiliates and making all the money. And that's where everything shifted. Then it was just purely internet about money. But there was a kind of freewheel pirating time there that things were much different. And all of this stuff within the culture, this is all developed within as the internet has been developing. So as they're saying, oh, well, when did this start? Did you recall? I think a lot of people have a different kind of recollection of how it started, and it depended on where you were at and what your experience, like where your environment was.
We feel entitled to these lesbian spaces. And so there's something fundamentally that has changed about the population of trans girls that are transitioning. And I think it's because we have
and as I said, just to make that point is there's a change, but there's also the change that's happened within of females, girls, young women, and their view of men, their view about of dating and sex, and of if that person is saying that they're female, and this person is I'm not even going to say of being a lesbian or being attracted to women, they have a fear of men. They have they're unattracted to this masculine macho. They have a fear of an anxiety about what that represents and being trapped within that. So all of the things that a lot of people of concern of saying, well, why that they're talking about here? Well, that trans women of dating other women and then taking over lesbian spaces. Well, these women are inviting them to. I mean, this is the thing. And all and it's really hard to see these women so many times bend over backwards and like that in politics, Democratic Party and stuff, of making all of these conjectures about trans women, and that they're not necessarily thinking about the women that are involved, why are they promoting this? Like, what is the real reason? The context of stepping out of it, and not just this binary black and white ones and zeros.
We clinicalized all of the standards here. So when I transitioned, I had to go to a doctor. I had to qualify for gender dysphoria under the DSM-4, which was a much stricter standard than it is today. I urge you, Brad, go look at the standards in the DSM-5 today. I bet for you as a gay man, you would meet 2 of the 6 you need.
Well, this is a key thing because it's not just the DSM-5. They added, and this is a really big deal. People don't really understand what a big deal this is. It was a very big deal to then, have each time of having the new DSM-4, then when the new DSM-5 came out. It was a big deal, and it would be a kind of, overall reassessment of a lot of different things, maybe rewording at times. Well, they put out a DSM-5 text version, edition, revision that specifically deals with gender. And for this issue and around trans, specifically there's a number of different words that are changed, but they're specifically around dysphoria and around the affirmation model. And for it not to be examined of seeing, wait a second, that this was the only thing that was changed. No concern then about like that around cell phones, or as I was just saying, porn, gambling. There's a lot of online things that have mental disorders and problems, and that they don't even connect as well, that this gender issue and a lot of the trending within it, and especially for like that in the pornified element or the females and Tumblr and Instagram and TikTok, that has a mental quality to it, an impact. And that's not in there. That's not mentioned. So that is a really big red flag, I would think. And as well as then seeing that within psychiatry, the shifting over from the medical associations that are always used, remember, any of you terfs out there hear the medical association all approves of this. Medical associations are lobbyist groups. They lobby each state. They get their main concern is they say about, protecting of quality healthcare. It's protecting doctors. They're a group of elite doctors in these boards that are put into these associations. And it just so happened that the American Medical Association, the Pediatric Association, the Endocrine Association, and specifically then psychiatry, they all went for this all at the same time. And specifically, it really then got put into place 2019 with the Endocrine Society. But with the psychology, they, being the gatekeepers, that they let go of being the gatekeepers, and all that they ended up doing then is just writing notes, writing letters in approval of, no therapy, no nothing. This is malpractice. And this situation where within psychiatry, where it's already a situation of being a debatable science, of so many things within it, of having issues around having quantifiable data to be a science, that you've then just destroyed this area, that we have a epidemic of problems and need to have people to help each other with. And it's all full of this crap. And so these medical associations are, get away with it. They allow the insurance companies to take the blame of they're just the tax collector. The insurance companies, they have a lot of control, but these medical associations have the control. And they can have some influences from the federal government, but it's more within the states. So now with Trump coming into office, the blue states are going to go crazy. And it's going to be because of these lobbyist groups. And they got away with not being called lobbyist groups. You're going to hear all kinds of attacks about, the corporate lobbyists and stuff. Are these corporate lobbyists? Is a doctor's association, a medical association, a psychiatry association, are they corporate? In a way they are, but nobody's thinking about it that way. So that's the change that happened.
To qualify for gender dysphoria diagnosis, because it's just pedestrian gender nonconformity. So what has happened is we have declinicalized every aspect of this and expanded who is trans. So now fetishistic cross-dressers are trans. Now, really femmy homosexual young.
So this is another thing, declinicalized. A lot of them have, other issues, eating disorders, it would be a body dysmorphia of seeing themselves as, being, really, really thin when they're really, really fat. That this is the other issue of having people be overweight and be depressed and see themselves, not in their true selves, and being from a young age of being very, very overweight and never doing anything about it, seeing it as being a lost cause, and that continuing to lead to depression, seeing situations of opioid crisis that went on and doctors all just pushing these medications onto people that, the area of psychiatry where they just are, filling prescriptions, basically. They're around counseling. You don't go for any counseling. There you go and you just get your prescription filled. And, where you've got people then that are on an ocean of different drugs, and you've got people that are, probably, isolated in a lot of ways, not having the ability to have friends to talk to or family that they can trust in and say, I've got these kind of crazy thoughts going on. Where is someone to say, you know what, we need to rethink about of what this means then around therapy, counseling, being able to talk to somebody where it's, oh, well, you're not a counselor. A lot of people, they just need a friend. A lot of people just need somebody to listen. They don't need a situation of it being, that they have to have all kinds of elaborate, therapies and also a medicalization. They just need somebody to listen. And that's lacking in a really, clear way for a lot of people. It's sort of ridiculous.
Young men, they're called femboys. They're going on HRT today. They
say they're they, them.
100%. You've got this non-binary project. You've got these trans masks, which are just, natal females that don't.
They're butch lesbians. This is the thing. Is nobody I was thought it was terrible. The butch, dyke, terrible phrases. But, that was a subsection within of the LGB. And, they call themselves trans mask. Okay, fine, whatever. A lot of them that this is a big thing. That is is part of the conversation. There's a lot of people that are saying they're trans and they're not transing at all. It's just like that. They don't fit into the stereotypes of female and masculine, feminine and masculine. So they must be trans then. Or they must be non-binary then. This is all such BS, and it's in so many ways it's so simple, and it's just been made so complex by anybody that talks about it, and including here. This is in some ways it's being more complicated than it needs to be.
Aren't super girly, and they want to escape their femininity by claiming this trans identity. So what has happened is the wheels have gone off the movement. And something...
I just want to say, interrupt that. No, it's not about escaping their femininity. It's about not having femininity, but being female. And having a difficulty of being able to navigate that. And this is Nancy Mace. Because Nancy Mace, of course, is very attractive and, has all like that, the petite figure, the makeup and hair, and a lot of the other women that are terfs and that are women, very pushing their femininity. And that's what a lot, myself, that's what I've been against my whole life. That doesn't mean that I'm a male. I'm just saying those things are all stereotypes. Those things in a lot of ways were gay men imposed onto you in a kind of controlling way and making you objectify yourself more. And not to mention, female clothes are more expensive. They're made cheaply. They're oftentimes they're made to make you sexualized in unnecessary ways. I mean, I'll go to buy a t-shirt and, it's got to have this big scoop neck on it. Why? The men's shirt is a normal shirt. Put on your t-shirt and you go. It's just, it doesn't make any sense to me in terms of saying that female is femininity. No, female is it is so much about your biology, how your brain works, how you communicate, how your voice sounds, how you present, your ideas in the world, how you communicate. It's different than for men. And I can relate to men's interests and some of the way they behave a little bit more than I can to the feminine. I don't relate to any of those things. Any of the things that Brianna here thinks of being, well, this is how I'm feminine. I don't relate to any of those. None of them. I find them offensive. So that's the thing is it's not a matter of me finding trans women offensive. I find the makeup, the hair, the clothes, the high heels, the stockings, the undergarments, the lingerie. It is all objectifying. And this is what lesbians of the 60s and 70s were fighting back against. This is what the women's feminist movement didn't want involved then in how they were approaching of dealing with women's rights at that time. And it's been lost throughout within it because, of course, women are not heard when they're talking about women, not about feminine women.
This fundamentally healthcare access issue has become this catch-all for every single person in the country that doesn't fit this.
Because this is the problem, that without the medicalization, without any of that, then you wouldn't be able. Now I'm switching. I've been pretty not challenging here to Brianna too much, other than being the Democratic operative, but in the situation here, do you not see then that you're presenting all of these things around being the sexualized version of a female and the things around women's rights and women's issues are kind of skewed within that?
Stereotypical definition of man or woman. And it's breaking us.
Yeah, it's hard because I often cringe on the right. I hear people who are genuinely anti-trans say trans people are mentally ill. And I would never put it like that because...
So I got off track a little bit. This was something I got off track a couple of times. Of course, there's a lot to get off track with. So there are some people that come to this of talking about cluster B personality disorders, talking about borderline personality, seeing elements of narcissism and histrionic personality of being very hypersexualized, being very needing for attention, always performing. And, those behaviors wrapping up together into one, as well as aspects of people on the autism spectrum, but they can be or not, not only of having OCDs, having compulsions of doing certain things or needing a kind of repetition. And within, especially for people with autism, of having a difficulty of reading social cues and a feeling an isolation and a loneliness, that all of this language becomes very simplified and is easy to then, feel that you're welcomed into and you are then embraced into, that's very compelling to someone who would have autism. These are all influences here. And I didn't even get into about, anorexia, bulimia, overeating, binge eating, there's so many elements within that, as well as in using drugs, not thinking about pharmaceutical drugs as drugs. Somehow the society in so many different ways, strangely, as fentanyl is an epidemic. Fentanyl has a medical use. Fentanyl, you can get surgery done, and that could very well be what is used that helps you to get through that surgery. And many people use it and, don't come out of the hospital going to the street corner to go get fentanyl. Things have a medical use for certain places and certain times. And the idea around having... So I don't know exactly of all the surgeries that Brianna's had, but I know some of the other trans people of saying, that they decided not to have their sex organs dealt with, or a lot of times it's to focus on the breasts for both men and women, is if women having their breasts removed and men wanting to have breasts. And I think that, people have kind of written that off, of thinking, well, that doesn't really matter much, or that's not as serious then as, having vagina or penis dealt with in surgery. And I really, really think that this is a topic that it gets lost because of thinking about breasts of being, for chest feeders. It's such a ridiculous term. But, in this situation, I lost track of where we were at. Let me see when I come back. We were talking about personality disorders, borderline personality, cluster Bs. There is an element of that, but that's not all of it. And some of those things are also, I would say that sometimes people would have those things, and all of this other anxieties or stresses make those things be worse. Like, so of having borderline personality, of especially for older people that they've had it for a while, and they're not been. Oh, this is the thing, is that they've had it for a while because nobody's going to treat it. Psychiatrists, psychologists, for years, there's no treatment for borderline personality. There is a behavior that's been learned. It often has an element to some sort of abuse from childhood, from parents in school. These things are ingrained into how they respond and have emotional dysregulation of how to be able to deal with things. Does this sound familiar? Having immediately going into, panic, into rage, into outbursts, that that behavior gets worsened when there's stress, when there's something that is seen as a threat, seen as an abandonment that they will potentially go through. So this all plays together. It's not a matter of like, oh, well, I would just say that the social issues, all of the fear, it's a genocide and everything on trans people, that just makes those personality disorders become more heightened, more red flags flying all over the place. And I'm just making the point that psychiatry has never wanted to deal with those. There's no treatment. They can't give them drugs. They're very manipulative. They lie in the counseling. So there's no point in it. And I know this from experience of having family members working in psychiatric hospitals. It's absolutely a fact.
It carries a stigma or a negativity, but trans people, at least historically, do and did have a mental condition called gender dysphoria. That's right. That needed.
No, some did. All right, yeah. And some of that was done in a clinical setting. Majority of trans people were gay men who were especially effeminate gay. Go look at, if you can go look up videos. I just found these amazing trove of vintage footage from the Christopher Street March, 1973, 1974. The gay guys, street full of, in a lot of ways, masculine guys, the beard, or the mustache, and they weren't all out there in leather. They weren't out there doing these antics. And they were some good looking guys, and they were all, into each other, being macho, good looking guys. And if you weren't that, in a lot of ways, the effeminate guys, and, this is the unfortunate thing, is that a lot of them, especially of being seen as she-males. If you lived in New York City in the 1980s, 1990s, you'd see the Village Voice on every street corner, free newspaper. And in the back of the Village Voice would be she-male ads. They were all being put out as escorts. Okay, so this is the true history of trans. This is, Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson. They were prostituting. They would get more money, and also like that, straight men being turned on by this, kinky fetish of having, a penis involved with, this hyper feminized sexuality of stereotypes. So it's a lot of role playing. It's a big, aspect of within the gay community of, you want to be, you see them, so many of them, they're terrified. The gay men walking down the street in a lot of ways, they're looking around like, shit, is anybody, my boss going to see me, my family members, they're nervous because it's a serious concern. And then you see the transvestites and they're just screaming and they're, carrying on, and Sylvia Rivera getting up on stage and attacking lesbians and stuff. I mean, this was 1973. So this whole attitude of what people think about trans history is just so, and like that of gay history, this gay man of not even realizing his own history. It's absurd.
That caused distress and needed alleviating.
That's
and
right.
So it was a rare medical phenomenon where we wanted to accommodate people so they could live their best lives.
It was these guys with fetishes and stuff that thought, hey, let's medicalize this. And a lot of the ways of things that were done, I don't know where there was any like serious data that was done on a lot of these things, but somehow it's just all like, oh yeah, we just all accept this. Even these people, they're criticizing it. I mean,
peacefully and be happy. It was worked out for them. It didn't really cause issues for a whole lot of other people. But ironically, it seems like the activist crowd has fought to demedicalize this issue at their own peril, because the medicalization is kind of what made it legitimate. Like, this is a real thing people need treatment for. So
this is a curious thing. So is it medical? Is it a medicalized, of a disability in a way? Or is it, then this goes right up in the face of what gays and lesbians had to deal with of being like, oh, well, you're something's wrong with you. That's why you were in the DSM all those years. That this is something that has a medical need. Now, when you have that, then all these people can be on disability then. All these things can be all paid for on disability. Okay, which many people are getting that. And people aren't aware of this. So that is the other side, is that, well, if this is a disability, then should we really be playing into it then? Is this the proper treatment then? If this is something that is wrong with you, where's the data to show that this is the proper way to be able to treat this? Or should we really be digging into you, getting into your, stereotypes of your gender? Or should it be that, no, you know what? This whole thing proves that we should just be teaching all the kids that there's no gender, and let them pick when they become whatever age. And this is, I want to get to this one part of why I decided to make this video. I don't know where it's at yet, but where Brianna talks about of where they first thought about when they were female.
The same way we respect people who have ADHD and might need some accommodations in class to get extra test time, we should accommodate some rare people who experience gender dysphoria. But they say this medicalization is transphobic and that you just are whatever you feel inside, and they've kind of ripped up this old playbook to their own detriment, because it became much less legitimate and lost, I think, a lot of public support as a result, because you end up with somebody just saying they're trans is enough, or just saying you feel like a different gender, or you're a they, them.
It's an interesting question, because would it be enough of saying I'm non-binary and not do medicalization, not do surgeries of any kind, not care about any, of these stereotypes of things? Which is worse? I personally, how I've lived my whole life before all this crap, and just how I didn't really think about it or care. And if somebody wanted to judge me based on, and especially females, would be of giving me the look and judging me about that I don't have my nails painted and I don't do I have all the accoutrements. I can't even stand carrying a purse sometimes, or a bag. It's just, so many aspects of things that are just assumed of being female turn me off and seem stupid and are sexist in a lot of ways. And I'm not just going to continue buying into it because somebody told me to. But now with the situation, I have to worry that females are going to think, well, look at me, and maybe I'm trans. And honestly, like that, many times when my hair is short, I'll have someone say, sir, and then they hear my voice. And they're, oh, I'm sorry. And I was like, oh, whatever, I don't care. I understand. I'm tall. I have bigger shoulders. I've been assumed of being lesbian many times, which is another, kind of screwed up thing to consider, is that if you don't look a certain way, oh, you must be a lesbian then. Okay. So if you don't think then that this issue around making all these judgments and pushing into these stereotypes that Brianna's in here presenting, that's the key thing. That's my issue around this person, is that I don't hate you, but you do all the things that I don't like that women do. And you're saying, well, this is who I am. No, you're not. You've been marketed to, just like all those women.
Them, or I'm a neo pronouns. It just opened up the world, and I think in doing so lost legitimacy in a lot of people's eyes.
It's also catching a lot of young gay people up in this stuff, right?
Personally, I think I would rather have a gay male who feels, whatever, concerned about homophobia, or just maybe not sure yet, too. Like plenty of people, I know plenty of people of changing later in their lives, too, for whatever reason. Or like that, of being bi, realizing, of like, oh, I'm gay. And then they meet a female, and it's just, like that. It's a female that is not the feminized stereotypes, and is turned on by this person. There's nothing wrong with any of that. But once it goes into this medicalization and sitting and saying, well, those people who were all just saying that they're non-binary, they're the problem. You need to decide that you're trans, and you need to then, get into this counseling and really dig into it and make sure. Give me a break. Now, on the other side, I'm not for people just disregarding their sexuality. And this being the other part of the extreme left of the attack on biology that they were doing, and the attack on, factual information about the actual differences between the male body and the female body. You might as well start talking about creationism then. To me, in my mind, it's the same thing. Okay, so there's this one part I want to get to.
Brad, you're 100% on with this. And look, this isn't I understand, there's such a tendency to look at the past and to feel like every single thing in the trans rights movement needs to copy things in the past. And homosexuality being in the DSM as a disorder, I think all of us would agree that is not called for. Gender identity disorder does need to be in the DSM. I had a condition. I'd had it since I was a child. I went to a doctor. I went on hormones. I went to an endocrinologist. I had a plastic surgeon work on my face, and I got better.
I do think that, and especially as culture has become more pornified, and especially also that we've seen more of women being the culprits, involved in being the abusers in ways to men, and or just outright lying about the threat that men can be. I think that there's something to be, to think about within that of giving that a little bit more thought. I want to let her continue. Brianna, continue.
And look at those criteria today, Brad, and I don't qualify for gender dysphoria. My life, my body, my presentation is 100% in alignment with how I feel. I'm married to a really delightful man. I get called she, her everywhere I go, any room I walk into, and it's great. And I don't consider myself.
It's great. Yeah, because Brianna, whatever their name was as a male, and whatever they did as a male, and I've seen photos of when they were male, they weren't getting any attention, I'm sure. And this is a big part of it, is of women this disconnect like that. Nancy Mason all focused on the perv stuff, and that just turns people off, because that goes into like that about gay men. Oh, I just realized of what I was going to say before, and I got distracted. The flags distracted me. I got the tunnel vision. I looked at the screen. That for gay men, so much of you hear different stories, and especially for gay men, not as much as for lesbians, but you do hear, and then if hearing, for some other trans people saying about how much abuse was part of their history. And it makes me wonder then within that, and especially within paraphilias, so different aspects of the DSM of concern about sexual deviance, and of, to take out homosexuality, and I'm not saying of being in part of a paraphilia, of being in sexual deviance, but of having acknowledgement within, I don't know, I've not read the entire DSM, it's a big book, and the addition part that they put in the text, that's something to delve into maybe next year for people to really get into. I'm going to do some like more focused in on looking at data, focused in also looking at how academia is spreading some of these ideas, especially around queer, non-binary, but it's connected in with, tear down the system kind of thinking. Because there's a whole different thing around the disconnect of making this be LGBTQ plus when there was never such a thing at all. Even LGB wasn't a thing. That was marketed by gay men, I think, for them to feel better about how they treated lesbians for years and years. Honestly, I think that's where that all started from. So, let's just add the T in there too, and then the Q, and then the A and B. All those things that, if we take homosexuality and the reality around having abuse sometimes being involved, not always, and maybe in ways like that of it's, an abuse situation comes out and you can have reactions in ways that can have a psychological effect, of course. And it's because of, this being something that is, the action is around sex, as opposed to being trans, where it's around how you present yourself. There's a huge difference in the concerns of what you have. And somehow they've managed to just blur all of that together. And I have real concerns then of any of the different things from, behavior, personality issues, anger management, autism, any eating disorders, all those things are being treated, as well as then if there's some aspect of abuse that's been there that has, a childhood history to it. And I'm not just saying of like parents in the home, like school, of bullying, of, some bullying and not just, physical, and some of it very mental. And we know it's so, I can't even think about that. I think that's something that adults are just really, really not in tune to. That this all, should be dealt with by psychiatry. And in the if we don't have these terms because we don't want to hurt people's feelings, like that is some of the things that I just said could be seen as being offensive to gay people. Well, you know what? I'm sorry. I don't hate you. But I do think you put yourself into some dangerous positions. And if women were doing that, they would absolutely be judged if women putting them, and as they are, I can't even look at that video of that girl and what she's did the other day. So, all right.
Mentally ill anymore. But if you are looking for the public policy of them covering vaginoplasty or FFS or all these other surgeries, I'm sorry, this has to be medicalized. And
I'm sorry, I really don't think so.
Between real public policy and this fantasy progressive world that a lot of people are living in, it's just killing our whole movement.
Yeah, well, and I wonder as well if it's the substance of the issues, right? So it's non-binary, it's delegitimizing, demedicalizing the trans experience, and so much more. A callous approach.
Because it's not the same thing. Just like gay and bisexual is not the same thing. And you don't have the same experience. And by no means am I defending queer non-binary in any way. But the situation of comparing it with trans is a real concern. And understanding that there's ideological things within the queer non-binary thing, but there's also a situation of having the political reality of the groundwork, especially in the United States, and these two being American, I think Brad's American, but having this framework around what macho means. and, full display of the macho man, Hulk Hogan, come back and all of that. This kind of performance of masculinity is threatening to women, and, a whole host of having, all these different, cabinet nominees. I've lost track of the different, even of RFK. He got away with it. Some woman just a couple months ago, this predatory aspect of male sexuality it's locker room talk. That's created a lot of this problem then on the other side of understanding why you're going to have a whole bunch of females and that are terrified of men, hate men, have, can see and it's the disruptive cognitive dissonance for a female as myself of what is a feminist mean anymore. And do you listen to, the divide within feminism going back in the 1970s, seeing it's just gotten worse, of having just these different, segmenting of women, that there isn't any ability of having a feminist movement of an agreement on things or how to include others. Can others be understanding, long time of having men saying, oh, I'm feminist. And this is something I've had to think about a lot. And talking to a lot of men that are supportive of the, trans movement, have lots of opinions. Actually, I would say have, opinions that are grounded in connecting it to gay and don't really want to know much more other than that, and seem as though, oh, well, it's just a bunch of people all, continuing this homophobia and just hating these people because of their sexuality and of being turned off by their sexuality. I don't, again, people want to do things sexual or whatever. My issue like that is saying there's real cognitive dissonance around what the word gender means, and there's a whole lot of people that don't fit into the stereotypes of what these gender roles were and presented as and marketed to everyone, and in different cultures, in different ways of being marketed, but are clear as day that they're about objectifying women and controlling women and getting women that they do it to themselves. Like, what ultimate power is that you get women to believe and do things that they just do and think, well, this is my empowerment. This is just messed up stuff, really.
Approach towards women's spaces, women's sports, other things. But I also think it's actually not just the substance, but also the kind of tone and tenor of the trans activism being incredibly just aggressive and hostile towards people that disagree with you.
So this is about, and what is woke? This is woke. Woke is the behavior. So it's been presented as like, oh, well, all these trans activists, they are woke. All the, BLM people and everything, they are woke. All the actions around, these screaming, outbursts in different places and like that, the Gaza people, they're woke. Well, the behavior of making like that, you get a slogan, everybody says it, everybody, is challenged to say it. If you don't say it, then that's the target. That's the whole point of it. And by the way, people on the right do the same thing. Trump's whole thing has been around that. If you're loyal to him, if you're not loyal to him, then you're canceled. And we saw it for 10 years of continuing. He's the king of cancel culture. People on the right now, there's this whole thing with James Lindsay and the woke right. He is the woke right. He's sitting there saying, oh, well, if you don't, you've got any criticism against Israel, then you're woke. Then you're, or like that, whatever, you're far right extremist and stuff. These behaviors, these demands, and the actions around, circling the wagons, that's woke. That's what this is. It's about, not about the issues. The issue can be anything. And this issue now it's really going to blow up because people have been supporting, like that, people thinking that the right wing, DeSantis, all these people they're going to defend this stuff. It's all still going on. because it's the difference between ideology and behaviors, and the behaviors of being when you're not in all of the just the ideology. There's just two different things. You can exist in being a non-binary person, a non-gendered person, but buying into the screaming that, there's no difference between a male and a female. There's a cavern between there. Somebody needs to be saying that. But there isn't, because we're sitting here debating on which is better, to be medicalized trans person or to say you're non-binary. Like, come on.
Yes.
In kind of contrast to the successful part of the gay rights movement that was like, let us get married, we're just like you. They celebrated people who went from opposing gay marriage to supporting it, right? Like Obama, Biden flipped on this and were celebrated for it. Now it's like,
because the lobbyists were created to, and lobbyists that were on different issues all came together and pushed the politicians in this direction. Just like the NRA pushes the right in the directions that they want, or APAC pushes onto politicians. This is why. And as I said earlier, American Medical Association, the different pediatric associations, the medical associations, they're lobby groups. They've got lobbyists in every state. That's why.
Oh, well, you might be pro-trans now, but there's tweets from you in high school where you used the T slur. And I can't help but just feel like, just approach-wise, the trans movement is one of the most radically self-destructive activist movements I've ever seen. It even makes people like me feel like I'm in opposition to it, even though I'm basically pro-trans.
Okay, so you're pro-trans. And see, this is the thing, is that there's a lot of people, they don't know the details. They don't want to know the details. They don't hear things outside of the minimal bits and bobs that are reported on here and there. And as the issue builds and it morphs in ways, it becomes more difficult to actually be able to report on. And people don't really want to know. Let's just be honest. I don't even want like that. I don't want to know about your sex life and everything. We're just at that point. And when it's put in your face all the time, and it's not just then about trans people, it's about all these advocates of people. But a lot of these advocates of people, they don't know of what's going on. They're feel like that. It's this whole movement around justice and what defend people having differences. And so I personally love celebrating differences. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But the gay movement definitely has had a lot of impact in this. And let's not forget, the gays were the performers. The lesbians were the organizers. The gay men oftentimes were partying, hooking up. They were, networking. They were very much around theater and fashion and art, and they had the ability to communicate in ways. Lesbians were in their lesbian groups, and when they were artists, they're rolling around in their menstrual blood and stuff. I mean, it was really a mess. So to even say that there was any kind of community is just not knowing the history of these different groups of people. It's really, really messed up.
Get real with me, Brad. I'm just going to make a guess here, because I hope we'll become really good friends, but I'm just going to make a guess about you. You probably have had many moments in the last 5 years, I'm guessing, where you've said something and some trans person is showing up in your mentions and they are tone policing you and bringing out the moralization, and even you as a gay man. Because I think if you and I sat down and compared our childhood, we'd find out.
Well, I would just say that for a few months, Brianna never responded to any of my tweets. And I don't know what it was I said, but then I was waiting for it. I was surprised if then no response to things that I had said, and then blocked me. So I found that to be kind of funny, to now be like, well, I'm sure you've been attacked and this and that. Well, there's another aspect of it of not wanting to engage. And that's the issue. Not wanting to engage with perspectives like mine of being somebody. I've been a lifelong Democrat. First time I ever voted was for Jerry Brown against Bill Clinton. And so to have my voice not be presented anywhere. That's why Trump won. And that's why in this situation, they all want to act like this issue didn't matter in any ways. And this is supposed to be a Democrat, strategist here.
A lot in common, right? We're different, but there's a lot there, and you just probably understand being born differently, right? So even you as a gay man, I bet there have been 1,000 moments over the last 5 years that you've just gone like, can you just act normal for 5 minutes? Is that it?
Absolutely. But then you get accused of respectability politics. And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of the point, actually. We want people to respect us and our rights.
This is something I've thought about so much, but I would love your opinion on this. This is really getting real with you. When I look at the trans girls I know that have integrated and socialized and have gone on to have partners and jobs, just like the bare minimum for a successful life, why the hell is it that all of us came from conservative households? Like, I think about this a lot on my...
Well, that's pretty easy to figure out. And that's been one of the things that I've said, even like that among people that are, to be coming from conservative parents, that there's an internalized homophobia, and there's just a denial. There's thinking like that you'll be safer to be a female than you will to be a gay, effeminate gay man. And, or just a feeling of knowing that you're, I would say, look, I have plenty of gay friends, seen their, lifestyle, for many years, doesn't really change. All of them, by the way, no interest in marriage. So this is the other thing. Well, lesbians, I know they're all, they get married as soon as they can. So the gay marriage thing, I think, was more of a lesbian concern, and just because of the gay lifestyle and of gay men, just kind of being pointing out that of being conservative, you're gonna probably feel this feeling of being, well, maybe I'm trans. And I think that we've seen there's plenty of Republicans that support it. There's plenty of language that's still around all of this kind of ideology. And Brianna sitting here saying, all my friends of everyone that's trans, that, we've all come from this conservative background. Well, that should say something, I think, to a lot of people. But realizing that I think there's the understanding now at this time, the difference is that there's an advantage. It's like a special caste. Then, being gay is no big deal. That you keep that to yourself. This is about presenting to everybody.
My show Dollcast, all of us came from conservative backgrounds, and all of us took integration very seriously. What I feel has happened is this fringe progressive ideology is setting trans people up for failure, because
so this is something to think about, of the integration. So, was there a concern like that of having people that, that totally passed, that didn't seem to be pushing any agenda, that just wanted to be left alone? Was that a thing? Yeah, that was a thing. Did it then become around getting attention and being part of a group and getting this whole kind of, your community, that's very compelling in a time of people being very lonely? Is that a terrible, evil thing? I don't think it is. I really don't.
When I transitioned, there was a document you could read, and it is almost look, you have a really serious condition. If you take agency in your life and you go do these steps, so this
is the thing. So a conservative background, where was it of getting, I don't know the history, but of getting the diagnosis saying, oh, you have a medical condition? Like, where and when did that happen? And in a lot of ways of not wondering, well, within therapy, of playing through the concerns of being all of the psychological influences of conservative, Republican, Christian, family value concerns of having a gay son, that's it, it seems, that's bigoted, that's terrible. But within of a lot of those things where the value is in, I have a son, they're going to have kids and I'll have grandkids. Understanding of why that would be difficult for parents to go through and why they might then go through these different approaches. I don't really know, of just, sort of social norms, I guess.
Go to a therapist for 3 months. We can talk about giving you hormones. Get on hormones, go to an endocrinologist. We can look at writing some letters, like go get a job.
So if Brianna wasn't on hormones and didn't have all this surgery, and then I know that like a lot of recent surgery, facial surgery, what would be feminine about this person? Is it being feminine, being a female, and even like that, of being not male? Is that, and I know Brianna doesn't say this, but of the people that are either confused or pushing it or buying it all and angry of any of these things, if they've got to this far of listening to me, is there anything about this person that's a female? I don't think so. Just like that of me, there's not a whole lot of things about me that are feminine, but everything about me is female. So,
like work for a year full time, we can talk about getting you vaginoplasty. So every single step of this was encouraging you to move deeper into transition and to take some responsibility and to integrate. And that set a lot of us up for success. What is happening today is trans women are women. And you just declare mission success before you even start. So I don't know why we're surprised that so many of the trans girls today don't act like women. It's just setting everyone up for failure.
It is, and it's kind of tragic because the people who are like you are the ones who are bearing the brunt of that backlash most often. And what's unfortunate as well is, and maybe I'm even guilty of this to some extent, because I discuss, for example, I just did a whole episode breaking down Chase Strangio, the ACLU lawyer advocating for
that's a whole other topic
before the Supreme Court. And Chase is like the face of trans activism at the moment. And I guess where I'm going with this is that I know from my personal life, there are trans people all across this country who are sane, good, decent people with jobs and families who are huge positives to their community, but they're not the ones going on TV to represent the trans community. They're not the ones going viral on TikTok representing the trans community. They're not the ones employed by the alphabet organizations as spokespeople. It's like the radical fringe of the trans community, and this is also true to some extent for the gay community, are like the faces of it. And I feel that they give everyone a bad name because they're so extreme and I think so understandably off-putting to people that people are unfortunately kind of binary black or white thinkers. And they think, I must be against trans because Chase Strangio is on my team.
So let's talk about the gay community of supporting the advocates, the supporters. So, if going back in the history of understanding that this is trans people being transvestites, transsexual interests were not always welcomed in the gay community. And in some ways they continued to be just of being drag queens and making fun of women in a lot of ways was what till the 90s, and then of it becoming more involved in a lot of ways. It became because, as I said, gay men were involved in fashion, the beauty industry, photography, the arts, of having a major, issues with women, the women artists, of having all different groups that, protested. A lot of times they were protesting gay men. They were having gay men in marketing. And so gay men of being able to then have you have a whole new area to make fashion for, a whole new way to market things and then creating this easy to use all these flags, the colors and stuff. It became simple ideas around commercializing all of this. So these are like the gay arts. These are of gay men doing it. On the other side of having women being involved in academia and continuing of women being in writing and in literature and then getting involved in theory. So, and having some gay men involved with that, not being more involved with like that, I would say of being lesbians or being women that are not they're in the academic world, that they've been pushing on that side. So having those two elements playing, they're not the same, but they work together.
TV telling me 2-year-olds know their gender truth, and I'm against that. In reality, it's like, you don't have to accept at face value that everyone is like that, but it is unfortunately human nature. And I think bad representation for a movement can be a fatal flaw when it comes to actually winning public opinion.
When gay people got the right for gay marriage, plenty of gay men put on khakis and polo shirts and went on daytime TV to just look normal. And who do we have?
Well, the other thing to realize too is that it was very quick of having Pride be corporate and being marketing and easy to market, very much of having colors that attracted, whatever, having a rainbow is very attractive, and of getting that to be a norm, using pride of being first as a protest to then become a marketing event. And many gay people turned off from it. I mean, a lot of gays were like, I'm not going to Pride. It's just all, corporate stuff. And that became then what normies and, everyday people thought, well, yeah, this is what Pride is.
It's a bunch of deranged lunatics. I had not come out as trans until 3 months ago. And I really wish to God I didn't have to. It's just, I'm a reasonably high profile person. And
I'm appreciative that Brianna has come out, so to speak. Think that people probably knew Brianna knew and whatever. I don't think it was a big deal to know with Brianna. But I think that there was definitely an element of realizing, hey, I've got an angle here to get some, get on shows like this and get out there. And some of the things I think that they're saying are helpful and specifically also have made me think a little bit more about it. But I think that I've also, by listening, especially the part that I'm really wanting to get to about the age of realizing that the things about this person who comes across as sane, who comes across as level-headed, who's saying a lot of the things of how things were, let's say, like 2014, 2015, but realizing that there's another undertow within this. And that is, like I said, take away the facial feminization, take away the hormones, and what's female about this person. And I see it all being around the things that are stereotypes of that females have embraced and also had imposed on them, and are just seen then as this norm that in some ways are true and in some ways are just they're oppressive and they're restrictive.
I have no fucks to give. I don't
Neither do I.
Fire me for just saying the truth about the trans movement. And the problem, Brad, is if you say this stuff, you're a transphobe, you're a right winger, they'll just discredit you. I've literally spent the last decade working in progressive politics. I ran for Congress as a Democrat. My literal job is to raise money for Democrats, and I'm a trans one.
So see, this is one of these people of having these, women don't, it takes a lot for women to step up. And there's a whole lot of all the things of what Brianna put so much effort into is the thing that women, if they're, like that, academic and they're professionals, they're focused on what they need to be doing mentally and to be at that level, but they've also got to worry about being judged about all the stuff of what Brianna is getting all the attention about, and why Brianna has been in these positions, and why Brianna is being sought to be heard from at this point. Okay. So, there's a little, kind of discrepancy in what it means of being female then and being in positions of power when it's around you doing everything to struggle to have to balance your whole life, oftentimes like that of kids, grandkids, maybe aging parents. Brianna probably doesn't have any connection to their family at all.
You can't go after me with this bullshit. So we've got to have, what I'm asking is every single sane trans person out there, there's no help coming for us. We have to stand up and take back our movement, because if we don't, this group of frauds is going to make us lose everything over trans women in sports and transitioning natal females, where if you look objectively at their detransition rates, there's no one that could look at this and think FTMs need to be transitioning while they're minors. These are often confused girls, a huge majority of them. So,
and see, this is another thing that people on the right say, and Brianna's saying here now, they're all focusing on, under 18. Well, so many of the girls that transition, they're doing it when they're 19, 20, 22, 23, and then like that 3 years later of detransitioning. The majority of the detransitioners they were not all doing it like Chloe Cole at 13. Some of them were, and that's really extreme, and that gets all the focus. But the concern for females especially is of reaching past the age of puberty, and you're not fully developed, but you've been in this very oftentimes childlike environment, childlike interest, a very fearful of things that are aggressive masculinity, but then wanting to be that, there's something going on there. And then I was having a situation I'm concerned about is, and I've seen this too, because like that of waiting to have parents say, when you're an adult, well, they're fixating on it through all of high school. They won't let me do this, and I've got to wait, and this is so unfair, and it's my rights to do what my body, and all of that kind of thing. Then you're digging into it even more by this issue. And somehow this, Democrat strategists, that they don't hear that. They don't realize that.
We've got to change some stuff. And I know you can sense the frustration in me. Yeah. I'm not usually like this, but I'm just really at the end of my rope with this.
But so how has the feedback been for, and I have an inclination of how it's been for you, but from trans people and the trans activists and just online, you've spoken out. I've seen you on Piers Morgan. I've seen you on a bunch of different podcasts and shows. Have you heard from some people quietly agreeing with you? Have you gotten a lot of nasty backlash, or a little bit of both? What's the reception been like?
I have probably gotten 300 or 400 emails from normie people going, you changed my mind on trans rights. I've probably had half of the Democrats, the trans people, they're Democrats that work here that aren't really public facing. They're just like the bread and butter trans Democrats working in the background saying, thank God you're finally saying this. I've had members of Congress reach out to me to talk about policy that the alphabet groups are telling them they have to stand by, asking for my opinion about this.
Now, see, this is concerning. That they all know that there's a problem, and they don't want to talk about it, and they thought it was, well, we'll just let it go, and that'll be okay. And wait, well, let's go talk to Brianna and see what the trans person thinks. Do they not realize that there are many women who disagree with this person, take offense to a lot of the things that they say, tweeted at them with respect, and this person ignored. And they want to sit and say, I've got nothing but positive responses. And all these, officials have come and contacted me, and I'm so important. Well, there's a cognitive dissonance still. You're not helping anything. And especially if it's a situation of the things that you're sitting and saying that this is all medicalized, because this person is concerned about worrying that they want to continue to be a medicalized person. And if they're not medicalized, then they're going to die, is what they're saying. And I just don't really see how that is. I really don't. I don't, like, to me, it's insulting in so many ways, of being like, well, I wasn't feminized and I was judged of being all these things that were not, petite little, or being model with all the looks and nails and stockings and high heels. Like, this is all a performance. And if this is who, like that, of having 2 times now of having women, Democrat women, being put through this grinder of trying to think that they're going to run to be the leader of the country and have to go through all this other crap. Now, Kamala Harris didn't have it as long, or as anywhere near as long, as the nonsense that Hillary Clinton was put through about being specifically of being a female and acting as she does. This is the problem then, of understanding this situation is acting as though that females, if they don't take up these stereotypes, then they're not going to be heard.
I've had, very high incoming people that are going to be in government soon reaching out to me to talk about this stuff. So there is a understanding in the Democratic Party
that's
that
concerning.
Something has to change, and they are looking for new leadership. And that is what I am standing up to do. We got to change course on this. And the other truth is, the Republicans, this, Brad, a lot of Republicans are not bigots. They just, like, the leaders will sometimes get power by being bigoted, but most Republicans, if you give them, like, look, I had a health condition, I went to a doctor, I made some choices, it was good for me, I'm not asking you to do anything, just let me live my life and go get health care on my own. Most Republicans are fine with that, but that's not our message anymore.
No, the message now focuses on things like trans women in women's sports, which I think just is such a tiny issue, but strikes people as so fundamentally unfair and unreasonable that it rubs people the wrong way, even though it's really, in the grand scheme of things, just such a small number of people. But it's just so fundamentally, and part of the problem as well is what people really don't like, feeling gaslit about biology. And so Chase Strangio, for example, tweeted, trans women are biological women, because and basically the argument is because they are women who are also alive and biological or something. Like, and I'm like, no, trans women are trans women, and the whole point is that they were born as natal males and they transitioned. So it's like this, and that's kind of the issue with women's sports, when they say, like, oh, there's no advantages here, you're all just a bigot, when you see Leah Thomas at the podium or something. People don't like, most, I think, reasonable people are open-minded enough, are willing to make accommodations, to treat people with dignity and respect their freedom, but they really don't like being gaslit and told that what you see as the sky is blue, no, it's green. No, it's green. You must say it's green or you're a bigot. And I think a lot of people have just gotten fed up and thrown the baby out with the bathwater in an unfortunate way, but it stems from just the unreasonable nature of a lot of the demands.
It's the behavior,
the meltdown over misgendering, the introduction of pronouns that are like inanimate objects, all these sorts of things that strike people as unreasonable. I mean, you can't make unreasonable demands of people and then be surprised when they say no.
No, of course not. And I have to tell you, I used to think it was like, this is just a right-wing trope, right? That trans women don't know that they're biological males, right? This is just a right-wing talking point. People don't really think this. But then when I came out and started arguing with people about this, it's like, no, there are a lot of trans women that actually think they're biological women. And I'm like, look, I personally believe something happened to me in the womb that just my brain went haywire. There are studies. I can show you a 2018 study that shows trans women, we have long sequences of protein receptors in our genes that we share in common that affect how testosterone and estrogen affects us, which personally is why I think most trans women look like me, like we're scrawny, gawky, like men. Testosterone obviously agreed with you more than me. And I think there's probably a genetic basis for what I'm going through. But I think it's just silly to pretend that we don't have to undergo HRT or facial feminization surgery, right? Just be
right. And look at his face, right? This is the thing. I don't agree. And if that's the situation in the study that you're talking about, I don't know the study. Is it possible? It's possible. I do think it's a situation of, possible things of the environment. I talked about this. I wrote about this in early 1990s of concern about environmental impacts on emotional response, about mental illness, ways of expression of how that, and then of course that was before the internet. So these things of what saying about that all these things are medicalized. This is not what the activist world is all saying. And especially when it's around, you can just decide of any time and you don't even need to do any of these, have any of these things of like that being scrawny or, maybe not having facial hair, any of the things that have not seen what it means of being a physical male. Does that mean you're female? Of course not. And that's what the one thing at least I appreciate of, this is the difference of Brianna with the other people of where they're differentiating themselves around being, I notice I'm going around the pronouns the best that I can, really. But of just, being real that when the trans women are women slogan was being chanted. And I think the first I heard that was 2019. That's when things went bad. And that's also when the medical association, specifically the endocrine society, got involved and pediatric society of saying the skewing this wording of gender, that is where we're at.
Be honest about what we are. I just don't understand it.
So let's to kind of close out our conversation a little bit. Some of my audience is very mixed, and some of them are, at this point, I would say, effectively anti-trans. They support the bathroom bills. They think I was open-minded, but this has gone too far. We've got to go against all of it. And I that's not where I'm at, but I hear them. Make your case to them that they don't need to throw out the baby with the bathwater. They don't need bathroom bills. They don't need to strictly crack down and ban transitions for adults or anything like this. They just need to have a sensible middle-of-the-road position on this stuff. Make that case for them to try to convince them not to go down that road.
So, Brian, can we, to answer this, can I just kind of back up for a minute and tell you the story and why I transitioned? So, I was 3. I really understood something was really, really deeply wrong with me. And
first of all, and I've heard these stories, I'm like that, hearing parents and stuff in this outside the Supreme Court are saying kids in there too. No one remembers anything before at earliest 4. At earliest, nothing. You don't remember, you don't know anything, you barely know how to speak. You of understanding of the world and your interactions of your gender of being male or female, you have no concept of when you're 3. So all of this is BS. Okay. When I was 3, my house was destroyed in a hurricane and flood. And we lived in a Red Cross trailer. My first memory of that was when I was about to be 5. That all that time, all that trauma, all those things, I didn't remember any of it. Anybody that's sitting there and saying, and like that, you remember your first day at school, kindergarten, maybe you went to, there might be something that you remember of when you're 4. No one is remembering anything from when they're 3. No one. So this is all BS. Unless it's, and making up stories and just sitting there going along with it. Like, just that shows right there that this whole story has been cooked up someplace. And if me hearing that they're a conservative background, which I didn't know until hearing this video today, that there you go, it makes sense. You are a not masculine, scrawny, as you said, your word, scrawny male body that then felt fear from the masculinized, aggressive male, testosterone-driven aggression. And you were in a position of probably having to go through all kind of things about religion and all sorts of moralizing around it and making you feel guilt and making the mental aspects of this become more ingrained for you to see this as a safe refuge. That then all of a sudden becomes, hey, wait a second, this is my bread and butter. And everything that you do, everything that you say is all around this. My life doesn't revolve all around of being, how can I be feminine today? I mean, and for some women it does, but that's not why they're women.
And, it started growing more and more serious. And like we would be separated by gender when we were in kindergarten. I would just feel overwhelming shame, right? And,
Okay, so I went into puberty before everyone else, or at least males, whatever, like it was clear before other females. I was taller. Every one of my pictures from kindergarten on, I'm the tallest kid in the picture. Do you know how that would make you feel sometimes if you're picked, okay, you get up at the top of the pyramid to stand. And then as you're developing breasts when you're in, 4th, 5th grade, okay, so I'm sorry, hon, this is part of growing up. And you don't really understand of what it means to be female at all.
There was a sense, like I never have any memory of not feeling as strongly as possible that I was supposed to be a girl. And every time growing up, I
was a tomboy. My dad, I was daddy's tomboy, went fishing, played sports, did all kinds of things that were around being seen as boy activities. Didn't really have much interest in things that were seen as feminine. Didn't have any of that pushed onto me in any way. Loved horses and dogs and art and doing art, and that was it. And everything of being around doing the interest in those things when I was a kid. That did that make me not be a girl because I wasn't putting on princess dresses?
Talk to people or behave in a way that felt natural to me. I just got called, I don't know if I can use the F slur on here, but like that might have well been my name.
Yeah, and that was I saw my friends of having that slur as well as the queer slur, and I defend the truth, and I defended many people of saying, that this is nonsense of picking on the more feminine boys that weren't the macho football wrestlers and the jock girls who picked on them and seen as being, this is animalistic behavior. So I'm sorry, babe, you were going through like homophobia and this is how you hid from it. And to me, of being a non-feminine female who defends sexuality and sex-based rights, I'm really disgusted that you were totally led down this path to think that this is who you are, as opposed to probably if you had just developed of being a gay male. But you wouldn't have been seen as being special then, would you?
I remember being very, very young, and I was in so much pain, and I grew up in a religious right family, and I remember like thinking if I could kill myself, I would be reincarnated. I could be a girl in heaven, and I'm just like sticking.
Oh God! And look at him. Oh, now this is where I'm going to end it. And I've seen so many different males, straight, gay, trans, whatever they present themselves as. These males of all buying this and acting like they're talking to female and how this emotional kind of thing and playing this up. Like, I'm sorry, but I don't buy it that you thought like, oh, I'm going to go to heaven and I'll be a girl. Like, this, you are completely not getting you're mentioning it, but you're involved in a Christian right-wing position where for many years the thought would be to put you into conversion therapy to make you not be gay. Okay. So you are totally dismissing that. And this all is going to be where I'm going to end it, is that all this stuff of everything was saying, about being woke, and then on like that of the woke right, they work together. And if you don't have the influences of the male aggression, the macho MAGA truck driving, waving my gun around, acting, and then like that of having women of I wear MAGA and they wear their, sex out in the open and they're all into the being the aggressive kind of female and saying they're their own sort of feminist. That all influences, they hate feminists, but I am woman, hear me roar, that those women, as well as all, especially of these men, that all go along with, yeah, but there's true trans people. And if they'll just behave themselves, then like Brianna, that they're not, running around screaming trans women are women, then that'll be okay. Because of course you don't want to hear and understand they're saying, oh, well, sports, it's just a couple of people. Or as Donald Trump has now just said, well, there's not many trans people and the bathroom issue isn't really a big issue and SCOTUS will deal with it. Well, no, the Supreme Court isn't going to be hearing that case. And the cases around all these things are going to be pushed to the states. And the states that are the blue states are going to become nuts because the lobbyists are going to kick in big time. And if you live in a red state, you're also going to then see a lot of Christianity being pushed at you. So understand that those things influence off of each other. And unless people like myself who are atheists, sick and tired of being judged for being atheist and told that I don't have morals, I see all of this as being immoral, totally regressive, totally gaslighting is an understatement. Because if you're not going to acknowledge the context of things and where there is a situation of having half truths being told constantly, then there's a cognitive dissonance that's gone on. So this like, oh, I hold my heart and oh, I'm just so sorry, Brianna. Well, you know what, Brianna, I would love to sit down with you and have a chat with you and ask you some questions about this time period of that you've gone through in this 20 years. I don't know how old that you are, but there's clearly some things about your history of the trans movement that you don't understand and that you've just gone along with. And maybe you should think about it some of understanding, wait, there's some things that I really hadn't thought about, including this right-wing upbringing that you've had that obviously had an influence on you. And all the right-wingers and all the terfs that want to say, oh, well, the Trump is going to fix things. And, oh, Nancy Mace, she's such a hero. You just watch. Because all that they're going to do is lip service, and all they're going to, like that, Nancy Mace is just going to go on about the pervy men, which, yeah, there are pervy men, but that's like the most obvious aspect of this. The power play that allows it to continue going on and using this persona and performance for power is a whole different thing that many women are overlooking for the easy response around the cray-cray that we all have seen. All right, terfs. All right, any sane person that actually made it through, anybody that could listen to my voice for 2 hours, congratulations. I am going to sign off, and I just wanted to say I would really like Brianna to put me off block on Twitter and let's have some debate if you think that you're so brave and you don't think that, you're getting all this positive response. I would love to have some of your response of any of the things that I said here. Cheers.